I'm back again with another video, and this time it's a little different. I wanted to try something new. I wanted to explore the themes of Black culture that often get forgotten or when it comes to Black performance and entertainment. And when I say forgotten, I don't necessarily mean forgotten in a sense. I mean maybe doesn't get its due credit or its due justice, or just people don't really talk about it. Now, dance teams, or should I say majorette dance teams, will be our focus for this video, but there is so many other types of dance specifically related to HBCUs. There's drumline, there's step, there's the bands themselves, which are not exactly the same thing. I mean, they're all very different and they have a long, rich history. So I'm not going to get into all of those today, although they are interconnected. I also don't want to branch out too much because I think something that often gets forgotten in HBCU culture and in Black performance is majorette dance teams. There's really not a lot of history or research that has been written about it. It is very much still like a kind of under wraps thing. And I don't mean that in a bad way. In some ways, it's really interesting to me that majorette and Black dance teams are still a widely kept secret from the non-Black world. Black culture is just so rich and vibrant, and I think a lot of the times non-Black people like to pick and choose kind of what's really cool, but to be honest, that's not all of our culture. Like in a lot of ways, I feel like rap and hip-hop are like the mainstream Black cultures, and there's nothing wrong with those two things. I love those two things, but like they're not the only aspect of Black culture entertainment, and it just feels a little weird when people like hyperfixate on that's all that Black Americans or have to offer. It's like, no, there's like other amazing things that we've also created and done, and this is just one of them. Join me as I explore and discuss the complicated yet strangely rhythmic world of majorette dance. Okay, so what is majorette dance and how do you define it in 2023? It's just very like culturally passed down, not so much like this is what, like there's no rule book, right? But there are specific things. So what I found was that there's 3 different types of kind of majorette dance. 1, there's traditional, 2, there's HBCU, and 3, there's hip hop. So what those 3 things are, the first one, traditional, is basically what you traditionally think of when you think about majorettes. And I would say that's usually the non-Black form. You know, you see like very crisp movement. Usually there's a lot of baton work. It's very synchronized. And even though this is widely popular, I would say in like the non-Black world, there are still majorette teams that are Black that use batons and twirling and things like that. It's not irregular, it's just the more traditional form. 2, the HBCU is basically a mixture of, they say jazz and burlesque, but I mean there's so many different types of influences, and we'll get to that when I define what it is. Usually it involves also a live band, and there's usually an 8-count call and response, which is when like the dance captain will do an 8-count movement and then everyone else behind will follow in the team. And then 3, which is the hip hop style, and that's kind of, I mean, the reference that I could say would be the Bring It show, which was on Lifetime. But it's very fluid. It consists of all of the other 2 things I mentioned, so the traditional and HBCU type of majorette dancing, but it's also got its own way of being. Again, I know that's confusing. I'm gonna break it down of what it means personally, because I don't really think that that's helpful, and I think that also kind of reduces what it actually is, because to me, when I think about Black dance and Black majorette dance, there's really not anything that is quite like it. It's very unique. The first thing that I would say would be the dance style. I feel like the majorette dance style is a very unique mixture of stunting, marching, energetic, fast, and clean movements, and they're rooted from different southern areas in the United States, but I would also say it's rooted in a lot of African dance styles. A lot of these teams and dance styles use high kicks, prancing, which we'll get into prancing in a minute, but it's a very specific dance style. Also posing, which is, I would say, a little bit akin to voguing. Although voguing came way later, you kind of see the influence in that. Jetting, which is a type of prance step. Another kind of dance that is often found in these teams would be bucking, or to buck, which is kind of this aggressive thrust of your pelvis forward. It's like a movement that in some ways is very like sexually suggestive, and in the rubric of American sexuality dancing, but I feel like to reduce it to that is unfair, and I feel like a lot of the times anything that involves Black women in dance, we just often get sexualized, and I'm not trying to go that route. I'm just saying that it's a pelvis thrust dance, and like that's what it is. In some ways, some people would kind of say it's akin to twerking, but it's not exactly that. I would also say they have to be in unison and in perfect rhythm. If they are not, it doesn't count. If you're not in rhythm, and if you're not in unison, that's you're done. Especially when it comes to Black entertainment. Like, there's got to be rhythm there. There's got to be unison. It's got to be crisp, clean, fast, and include all of the other movements. I would also say included in those dances, every team that I've seen, in terms of how I define it, has a captain, which that captain is a big deal. They lead the team. They either do the 8 count call and response, or they're just there to keep the team in unison. Everyone kind of goes off of them. They lead the processions as well, which we'll talk about in a minute, because there are processions as well as like kind of stagnant dancing, and they also are usually backed by a band, a live band, which has a long legacy as well. Again, we won't get into that in this video, but they have a long legacy. The dance teams always lead the procession, and the captain is always first. I'll include a video so you can see. Also, sometimes they do dances on the risers, and I would say that's a big defining moment for these specific dance teams. Like, they do the dances on the risers. I don't think I've ever seen a non-Black team do that. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never really seen a cheer that's done like that. So that's kind of like the dance part of defining what a Black dance team would be, but there's another step as well. The second thing would be the outfits and the hair, which is a big component. Not just the dancing, but the look of the team really defines what a Black HBCU dance team is, or just a dance team in general, a Black dance team. Okay, now that we've defined kind of maybe what majorette and dance teams are, we can kind of get into the history. And again, if you have more criteria of what you think it might be, or more definitions, please put them below. This is an open conversation. There's not a lot of history out there about it, so please comment. But let's get into the history. I'm going to be reading from my laptop because it has a lot of the information for the history, and I don't want to mess anything up. So majorette actually comes from the Dutch word des Marijets. Probably saying that wrong, but I'll put it above, which were carnival dancers who used batons at the time. Leave it to Black people to make something our own. But it wasn't until it reached the Black American South, especially in high schools and colleges, that it came to include a mixture of jazz, ballet, and hip-hop and dance like we know it. Majorette dancing only started around 1968, so it's still relatively new, and this could be why maybe a lot of people still don't know about it, because it's still growing and we're still exploring it. But let's also remember that there was a time, even after Brown versus Board, that schools were still highly segregated. So even though majorette dancing started in 1968 with mainly like Black high schools and colleges, you might think, well, 1968, I mean, that should be around the time. No, schools were still segregated. People were still holding on to that. In Brown versus Board, if you don't know what that is the law or the court case that put an amendment integration of schools. So white and non-Black and white and Black kids could actually go to school together. And you still won't find step in majorette teams that are Black in PWI institutions. Like, I went to a predominantly white institution for college, and for high school, never was a thing. So who started this majorette type of dancing? That still remains highly talked about and controversial, so like don't fight me on this. What I'm going to say is that the first recorded black majorette team was Alcorn State University. Don't hate me. With the team called the Eight Golden Girls, and the team still exists today. They emerged in 1968 wearing matching outfits and long flowy capes that were actually publicized and talked about. Now, I'm sure there were other people who were doing that before them. That's just when it was recorded. Then after that came the Southern University's Dancing Dolls, which were introduced in 1969, so a year after, and they brought along the signature high kick and pose, which we'll get into, but a lot of teams have that high kick and pose. Some teams also, especially back then, were still using batons, but many dance teams, I would say now in the present day, don't use batons as much. I just want to highlight that there are a lot of teams, so just because I don't happen to mention any doesn't mean that they have any less validity than the other. That's not true. There's just too many to get into. There's so many, which is incredible. The interesting thing about a lot of these dance teams is that these positions are highly coveted. Most girls audition intensely for these positions, and the crazy thing to me is that you do usually have to pay out of pocket, both for the audition, for the hair, and the makeup, for everything for the whole year if you get on the team. That's insane. That's insane to me. Okay, so the first team would be the Sophisticated Ladies at Tennessee State University. They have very specific dance requirements for the Sophisticated Ladies, such as splits, high kicks, a grand jeté, a switch leap in second position, leap in the second position, toe touch, single pirouette, double pirouette, calypso, heel stretch, axel, turning leap in second position, turning C jump, walkover, tilt jump, among many others. These are just the ones that you have to know during the audition. The second one would be the Fabulous Dancing Dolls. Their style is very like cheerleader-esque, with rapid movements, and they have a lot of in-sync lines. Quote, the doll style privileges fluidity in movement, a quality they describe as being poured like milk. Ugh, being poured like milk? That's amazing. That's amazing. Another popular team are the Orcheses. I'm probably saying that wrong. Don't revoke my black card. They are from Grambling U University, again, very well known. They have a lot of high kicks. It's crazy. They have very slow, swaggery like movements. They have a lot of improv. They are very graceful. I mean, they're like beautiful when they dance. Like they are, I would say, a lot of swagger. The fourth team is the Golden Girls. Again, these are the same Golden Girls that we talked about in history. They still exist. They're still top tier. They're at Alcorn State University. They do a lot of traditional things. They still have capes for sure. They do a lot of incredible high kicks. I mean, when I say it's such an interesting art form, that's kind of what I mean by these high kicks. Like, they're crazy. Number 5 are the Dancing Divas at A&M University. There's also Howard University, which has the Ooh La La dancers. They've been getting a lot of recognition the past couple of years. There's also the Prancing Jet Sets, which is the Jackson State University dance team. Now, the Prancing Jet Sets I wanted to put on here because they did kind of invent the move called jet setting, which I talked about before.
What's unique about J setting is it's a combination of just every dance style, and it allows you to be as creative as you want to be. The key elements would be marching, preciseness, I would say togetherness, being able to go in and out of femininity and masculinity.
And again, like I said, there are many more, and let me just tell you, people get competitive and very like crazy about these teams if you don't include them. Please don't hate me if I don't include a team. Include them down below. There are so many that are amazing and incredible, and again, it's just such a unique dance form that you just have to learn. And I'm not putting an emphasis on who is the best. I'm just putting emphasis on what is majorette dancing. And again, like I mentioned with all of these teams, again, there's no like book. There's no rule book to say this is what this team does and this is what this team does and here's these performances. Like, that's not necessarily the case. You can find performances on YouTube, of course, but like the inner working process of how these dances come about and how they choose things is very still like culturally kept secret. I think that's really cool. And such like an interesting way to keep our culture alive. Yeah, like a lot of these things you can't find just out there. Like, you probably couldn't find a book about it. It just is, and it just exists, and that's such a cool art form. All of these people are just such amazing artists. Honestly, it's hard to replicate Black dance teams because there really is no rule book. You learn it by watching others, and you learn it by being like culturally in the space. It also requires specific rhythm and swag, which, you know, you simply cannot learn. Like, I mean, you could learn rhythm in some sense, but if you don't have it, you just don't have it. You are born with it, and you watch it, and that's it. There's just something magical about this art form that I think is just not talked about still. Enjoy the rest of your week, day, night, whatever it is, and thank you for watching. Bye.